All
All
right.
right.
Hello, everybody.
So we were just talking about different animals
Hmm.
that we're noticing a change in the animals,
Yeah.
and other people. We've watched videos of like Mr. MBB 333. He did it last summer. He was doing, animals acting strangely.
Mm.
But that we were watching someone else do it. Now we're noticing animals being more. Um, I don't know. Their behavior is just different.
Hmm.
She was Gina was talking about
Our neighbor's
a
cat.
neighbor's cat. They live, I don't know, 3 or 4 houses up, and he came down one day.
Hmm.
Um,
Couple.
we leave our garage. We open it during the day. Some days we open our garage part way to let some air in, and the the garage door into our house is just a screen that you can
It's a
park.
magnetic.
It's magnetic. You can park. Well, the cat just came in and just started walking around the house, and then that
Checked
was
every room and then laid it. Was in here a long
yeah,
time.
it's here for a couple of hours,
We had to walk it down to its house, and it took us a while to leave.
and it just followed us down to its house, and then it we talked to the people the people there. It was their cat, and we hung out with them for a little bit, and they thought it was funny,
Hmm.
whatever. So then
It did it again last night.
last night,
Came in, well, 2 nights this week.
2 nights this
Yeah,
week,
he came in to visit, and stayed for a long time, and then I walked itself home. The time before that, I had
she
to
was
walk
on the love sack in the
in the
main
living
room
room.
in there, and she just sat back and he hopped up
Hopped up beside of me and
beside me
went to
and
sleep.
fell asleep. So um,
Because the name is appropriate then.
Nice, yeah,
Snugs, yeah.
Snugs, yeah.
And the other day we were out for a walk, and we were walking the golf course path,
Mhm.
and so we were on the front 9 walking. We live kind of on the back 9. We were walking the front 9, and we went under this big tree when we were side by side, and I felt something. I'm walking, so I wasn't standing still. I was walking, and I felt something hit the middle of my back. I don't know how. Something hit the middle, but didn't hit the top of my back. And then I felt it like I went to move as I was still walking, and I still felt it. And so I stopped, and I turned around and said, "Is there something on my back?" And she kind of reached around to look at me, to look at
Yeah.
my back, and she goes, "Oh, it's a bird. There's a bird on your back."
Yes. It was a little, well, it looked like a little blue, I don't know if it's a baby blue jay or if it was a baby blue bird,
But
but
it wasn't. It had
was
its
very small,
it
but
had
it
its wing, but
had its
they
wings.
hadn't fully come in, so
Hmm.
it was having trouble flying.
Hmm.
So I think it was learning how
Oh,
to fly, but it fell out of the tree and landed on
Right between his shoulder
right
blades.
between my shoulder blades. How in the world did that happen when I'm walking? I'm
Yeah,
walking under it and it lands on my back. It
yeah,
must have flown partially or
yeah.
whatnot. So
So it
so
was,
then she went to reach for it and it jumped off my back,
yeah.
and then we just kind of were following it, and it was making these little hops,
Hops.
and we just watched it, and then we turned to each other to say something. We looked back and it was gone.
Yeah, we've
And
had
then
a,
the one
that's
day,
very interesting.
I had the skink.
oh yeah,
It was
came in and looked.
probably about that long skink, and it was probably about that big around, and it had a pink head. I think I talked about
Yeah,
it.
we talked about that.
And that came into my room and was just
Hmm.
looking at me,
Yeah.
and I was just doing this. My arm got tired, and the other one. So that, and the other day you took a picture
Oh
around
yeah,
the
the
pan that we
watering
put out
hole. Yeah,
there.
we
We
have the
could call it the
water.
watering hole. We put a little pan out there. It's about this big, and it's about that deep. We fill it up with water
Mm.
whenever it doesn't rain, um,
And
and the squirrels and the birds
when the
go there
rabbits.
usually one at a time. Well, we looked out there one day,
Mm-hmm.
and there were 2 thresher birds. They're big sized birds, and a big woodpecker, all vying, and 2 young cardinals, a male and a female, all vying for to get a drink of water.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they were all around the water.
And the
at
squirrels
same
were right
time.
there too, and they were
Yeah.
feeding, but they weren't drinking at the moment. But so she even took a picture
Mm-hmm.
and got the actual
The redhead.
the red head on the woodpecker
Yeah.
as it was bending over
Yeah.
to drink the water
Yeah.
because it was facing us.
Yeah, it's amazing. Animals are.
And the bunny
engaging.
rabbit's been almost every day.
Yeah, I was out there again this evening. Yeah, we've got our little.
Little
friends.
woodland friends.
Exactly. Our woodland friends.
Yep.
Mhm.
So
Fun times.
okay.
I know I have a residential woods behind my house, and it's like full. I mean, it looks like a full forest almost.
Mhm.
The things that come out of it, raccoons, all kinds of stuff in here.
Yeah, we
Sometimes
have-
some of them have bears.
Oh, really?
We've
Mhm.
we've
We
named
haven't seen a
our
bear yet.
we've named, it's probably more than one
Yeah.
raccoon, but we've named them Tank because the squirrel feeder that we have nailed to the side of the tree,
Mhm.
which is probably about that big, and it's got this opening that you
Kinda
can
weird.
lift up. The squirrels haven't figured it out yet, but the raccoons have. And they, at night, anytime after dark, they go there. And I've got some pictures of him. And he actually sits on the rim of it and holds up the door to it while he reaches in there for food and
Mhm.
gets the food. When he's done, he just jumps down and the top just slams shut and it makes a tang sound. So we called him Tank.
Tank again.
Yeah. And it's almost every night.
Every
And
night,
maybe
yeah.
multiple times
Yeah.
a night.
Sometimes he does it in the middle of the night. It's really.
Oh gosh.
Yeah. I'll go to bed around 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, sometimes even later, and I'll go to lay down and I'll just be getting into that sleep mode. And all of a sudden I hear this clank and it wakes me up. So he does it all different times at night.
Yeah, we haven't seen a bear yet. We've seen deer, but no bear yet.
Or lions and tigers.
Yeah. No lions and tigers either.
Yeah.
We had a bear family in our neighborhood in one of the ponds here taking bath.
Really?
Hmm.
Well, that's cool. Awesome. Well, we've got some interesting things to hear, right, hon?
I don't know. You tell me.
Yeah. Buckle your seatbelt. No, this one is one I can't wait to read it again too after listening to it because it's.
This one's pretty deep. So hearing it, I don't know what that'll do. I mean, I think that'll definitely do some activating, but reading it, because even I have to go back, and when I'm reading it, I have to kind of go back and say, okay, I want to make sure that's in place before I go on. So just keep that in mind. And by the way, we have through 23 up on the blog site.
Yeah.
So episodes 1 through 23 are all up there. So
and the link will be in the description.
Is in the description, so you can go read it at your leisure. But 23, you're still typing up 24.
Yes.
Okay, so we'll get those up, and this is 25. So episode 25. Now this is all one dialogue, so no breaks. All right, so here we go. This one is entitled, "Oh, Grow Up. It's Time for You to Fly." Do you have a moment? Valor's thought intrudes into your own without preamble. Curious, you think back to him. Sure, come on over. Valor then appears before you, standing resplendent in his official attire. You straighten in your seat, instinctually. Despite the gravity of the presentation, you relax enough to quip, "You didn't have to dress up for my sake. A simple bow will suffice." He doesn't even crack a smile before saying, "It is time." You look now at him in confusion and ask, "Time? Time for what?" With little delay, he responds, "Your jump." Dumbfounded, you inquire, "You mean the jump?" With a slight nod, he answers, yes, its energy approaches. Shocked into this now, you stammer, but I thought we're not prepared. What are we, how long do we have? Weeks? Months? He shakes his head slightly and says, the final grains of its sands to mark its coming are falling now. Its blessing requires no preparation, only acceptance. You and your people will awaken into a new dawn of time, resetting the clock of your past. I come before you to announce that my people and the people of the other races stand ready to assist you upon your awakening. Walking your cascading thoughts of implications, dragging you first one way and then another, the Lord, glide, the Lord glides over to you and confidently, yet compassionately, places his hand upon your shoulder. His stare into your unsettled eyes expresses a brotherly.
I'm gonna mute yours, Jenny, if that's okay.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Okay, good.
Okay. The Lord glides over to you confidently, yet compassionately, places his hand upon your shoulder. His stare into your unsettled eyes expresses a brotherly love that cannot hide the anticipation he feels for something you have yet to embrace. In that moment, you sense a slowing of time outside of the essence of your bubble, just as he invokes your acceptance to his next words. Have no fear as you step into the state that harbors none, and release the last of your need to struggle against a will that offers no resistance. His knowing face now releases a knowing smile as he punctuates the moment with, this you will love. With that last statement, you can't help but to relax and begin to try on the fit of its testament. How much time do we have? He attempts to relax you further with, you have all the time you want. But I thought you said it approaches. He nods. It does, and it will make an offer you cannot refuse. Allow you time to sense its magnitude and await your acceptance, all within the blink of an eye. Asking how much time you have or when this will occur is a focus on its lack. Relish its anticipation, and you will have all that you need. Aware of your seesawing emotions, you attempt to settle yourself before asking, what's it like? You know, actually going through it. He contemplates his answer and then says, like waking from a dream full of epiphanies. Many in your society won't remember how they were before it, but you will. You interject, because I'm a keeper? Yes, a weaver, a seer, and a keeper. You've probably been seeing some of what's coming, but you don't know what it means. That, however, will change after your reorientation. This piques your interest, so you ask, so I'll be disoriented like everyone else? He shakes his head and says, no, not like everyone else. You will come out of your disorientation before anyone and sense their collective state. Your weaving will immediately commence telepathically. Your knowing of who you are and what you want, what they want, will expand beyond your current comprehension. The voices of your fear and doubt will swap places with your confidence of knowing. They will no longer lend themselves to your need of status quo and thinking small. When they attempt to demand your attention, your knowing awareness will no longer cater to their needs. This will also extend to your emotions. Your higher consciousness will insist that your emotions step up and begin shedding your vulnerabilities. You now interrupt with, like telling them, oh, grow up. Valor smiles brightly and replies, "Indeed, it is now time for you and your species to grow up. This jump is your proverbial push from the infantile comfort of your nest. It is time for you to fly, as it is the intent of your will." You chuckle at this, and he gives you a questioning look before he says, "Is that not the appropriate use of the analogy?" You wave your splayed hands, palms outward, back and forth, and say, "Yes, that was spot on. You just reminded me of a favorite song from the time before called Time for Me to Fly by REO Speedwagon. I grew up with that song, and it always held so much meaning to me. This just seems so synchronistic in the moment. Thank you for that." Still brandishing his smile, he says, "It is my pleasure. If you like that, you will love the flow of synchronicities that follow your awakening." Sparked by this, you're encouraged to ask, "What will we be after we awaken? And how will you be assisting us?" Knowingly, he answers, "Collectively, your society will be more integrated. The telepathy you've been sharing with other weavers will become more widespread. Your technology will be less relied upon, although still useful. That need your society has had to stay busy will be replaced with a drive and eagerness to explore a greater landscape of experiences. Your people will feel as though their minds and bodies are no longer held down by gravity. As far as our assistance to you, that will primarily be showing you your options in raising your point of view from the valley on your knees to standing upon the mountain of your potential. Initially, we'll assist your people out of their disorientation, more as a calming presence than anything specific. It is after your society reorients itself that things get really interesting." You ask, "How so?" He ponders this a moment and then says, "Because we really don't know where your expansion will take you. We've gone through our own, and we've talked with other races about theirs. They all share some similarities, but they're all different. Throw in your amalgamation aspect, and well, who knows? Should be very interesting, though. Your GCOS sessions will become quite the experiences themselves. Each of the other species carved out a one-lane road into creation, but your people, they'll blast out a superhighway. You, my dear friend, are on the precipice of the greatest thrill ride our universe has to offer. You need only to get over your fear of heights. The position you personally have put yourself in is, without question, the best seat in the house. Imagine being on the planning crew for your people's next theme park, guiding them along and building it, and then visiting the park with them after it's completed to live their thrilling experience with them, knowing all of its little secrets. You could not have positioned yourself any better to maximize your joy at what is to come. You could trip and fall while in the park, and it will only add to the enjoyment of the experience. Your people talk of luck as though it was a blessing only bestowed upon you if the stars were aligned just right and you sacrificed your right arm. Luck is merely a synchronicity of aligning to your will. When you awaken, your will shall guide you to swim in a synchronistic ocean of luck. Not wanting to question this, you ask, "Why does it seem so hard to believe? I know this is your truth, but I'm not able to make it mine yet." He nods and replies, "We often joke among ourselves that our past of acceptance often prevents our accepting of our future. Whatever state you're in now, you only achieve through acceptance. But to get there, You had to become accepting within your previous state. Your sticking point is in your acceptance that you don't possess this new state, where you think in the past of your acceptance, but not far enough in your past to see the path of your accepting. You are a walking collection of acceptance, led by moments of accepting. Everything you think, believe, or do started with a first step of accepting, so that you could then think, believe, or do it again in acceptance. Your future is just another path of your acceptance, just as your past is. If you had your past to live over again, you wouldn't live it the same, since your state is now different. Where you are right now is more oriented to accept the living of your future than a reliving of your past. Accepting of your future is the simple act of acknowledging that the acceptance of your past is made up of the steps leading you to this moment, to experiencing your accepting of the next step in your acceptance. Do you remember when you came to talk to me at that festival? You nod and say, "How could I forget with your offer to mind melt?" He grins and it continues. Yes, well, everything that has transpired since then was your future at that moment. Yet now it is the path of your past acceptance. Imagine if you hadn't been accepting of that path in that moment. That would have seen you pass that moment into the acceptance of your past and not into the seminal moment of accepting your future as it is today. Trace that path from that moment until today, and you will find a trail of your acceptance leading to this seminal moment of accepting your future yet again. However, just as in the prior moment at that festival, your future from this moment now is not in doubt. Only your acceptance is. You now interrupt him. What? Are you implying my future was already set when I came to meet you at the festival? And it's set now? He gives you, excuse me, he gives you his knowing look and says, and asks, why ask me to convince you of that which you already know? Do you still believe that if Doug hadn't convinced you to meet with the Blades, none of this would have happened? Reconsidering your stance, you admit, well, he did make it happen that day, and I was still quite reluctant at that point. But I know what you're going to say. Doug only pushed me because I kept bringing it to his attention. He remains quiet for a moment and then says, I see that you want me to lay this out, despite you already knowing it. Before Doug even played his part, you sensed the seminal moment of your future approaching and that your acceptance wasn't in place. So you manifested it through a sequence of events utilizing Doug, Anne, and myself. You may not fully accept that is what happened, but you are the only one who wanted it that way. Doug and Ann would have preferred that you maintain your status quo, but Doug, who loves you as a brother, felt the disturbance in your force and offered to play a role in the play of your acceptance. Then, as you and he were walking up to where I was sitting, what I sensed from you was your intent to accept it and a request for me to play a part in your acceptance, which I happily obliged, seeing as it aligned with my intent. You may not accept this, but you knew I could convince you to accept and thereby relieve you of your doubt. But I did not convince you. No one can convince you of that which you aren't already convinced of. The only thing in doubt was your accepting of what your will was presenting before you. Your resistance to accepting is really a resistance to your will, which stems from your fear of heights. Fear holds you to the illusion of safety on the ground, while your will intends to raise your awareness to new ways of experiencing you. Your truth isn't given or told to you, but is found by exploring its heights within you. You then ride your truth outwardly to experience its impact on you emotionally. As with all things, truth has its counter opposite, and that is fear. Truth dissipates fear, and fear blinds one to truth. If one chooses to experience fear, they will seek the false sense of security of avoidance, being small, and staying on the ground. Anything to counter exploring and experiencing the accepting and expansion of truth. Opening yourself to accepting truth, however, is a recurring decision to choose truth over fear. The ultimate awakening with respect to fear and truth is realizing that fear attempts to dictate behavior to limit an experience, whereas truth removes all restrictions to experiencing. Fear is confinement against your will, and truth is freedom from your fear. When you enlisted my help, it wasn't to convince you to do anything. You had already decided. What you wanted from me was to assist you in overcoming your fear so that you could feel the freedom to move. What if I told you that fear isn't a true emotion like the others, but instead it's an attempt to hijack your emotions and control your expansion? That whenever you feel fear, that is something trying to control you by telling you, no, you can't have that. Succumbing to fear only produces more fear. Overcoming fear is declining any restriction to your movement and choosing the expansion of your truth. Now that you find yourself at another decision nexus, enlisting my aid and confronting your fear, how do you wish to proceed? Feeling both reprimanded and elevated by what Valor has said, you respond, as you did in our first meeting. You have spoken the exact blunt words I needed to hear. I won't insult your intelligence or disrespect your efforts in providing me aid to overcome my fear by apologizing for enlisting your help. I know you did so willingly, and for that, you have my gratitude. Even more so because I feel you have done this again for me with a higher purpose. Is this in preparation for my awakening? He nods and says, yes, I do this for one, you, so that you may do it for many, who will then do it for many more. You are where I was in my past acceptance, and I am where you will be in accepting of your future. If you are accepting in this moment, you will remember this moment in your future as your past acceptance and use it to guide others into accepting. You will know I convinced you of nothing, but only played a part in showing you the confinement of your fear and the option you always have in accepting the expansion of your truth. That truth now includes a knowing that others do not come to you for convincing or for you to make their decisions for them, but for guidance to accepting their truth in the decisions they have already made. If you are truly accepting of this, your hesitancy concerning the increased responsibility you have towards others will resolve into the truth of knowing that your responsibility isn't to take on their decision making, but to not interfere with it and guide them to accepting their own truth and responsibility. Your responsibility is to find your freedom of truth and aid others in accepting that same responsibility. Fear of heights and responsibility is really your fear of freedom and truth, of now being responsible for your own movements outside the confinement of your prison of fear. However, you have already decided to break out of your prison and have enlisted my assistance in guiding you to accepting this into the acceptance of your past. Moreover, you enlisted my further aid in showing you how you might go about guiding others in accepting their freedom. And you did this using yourself as the first test sample and as a learning example you can guide by. Bravo, my suzerain. The student has become the teacher. Humbled by his sentiment, you implore, I had no intention of that. I only see it now as you bring it to my attention. You are still my teacher. His smile encompasses his whole being as he proclaims, then I shall be a teacher mentored by his student. Still trying to convince him that you had no intention of concocting such a scheme, you tell him, I really had no idea that this would play out the way it did. Smiling that knowing look, he responds, and yet that is the way it played out, according to your will. You hadn't accepted it while you were doing it, but now you accept that is what you have done. Can you now see how accepting has revealed and expanded your truth? You ponder that a moment and then ask, okay, maybe, but how can I do something like that and not know I'm doing it until afterwards? Welcoming this inquiry, he answers, we live the path of our will through our actions, often not knowing that we are doing so. What we know of it is only what we accept, but that is frequently only after we look back and see that our path of acceptance now includes it. In aligning to your will, your knowing and accepting converge into the same moment so that you are consciously aware of what you are doing and you find truth in that moment. When you awaken from your jump and following your reorientation, you will be so aligned with your will that your knowing and accepting will merge into oneness of truth, not for occasional moments, but for spans of hours, days, and eventually months and years. You will live a life full of epiphanies because you will be in a constant state of accepting and open to exploring an inner universe full of truth. Think of how you have dealt with doubt in your past. Typically, when you have felt doubt, fear was right on its heels to prevent you from moving, thereby hijacking your will to remove that doubt. Now, imagine a time when you feel doubt. Fear is no longer there to hijack your will, but instead, curiosity becomes your default response. All doubt represents is the absence of knowing, and the only way to remove that doubt is to explore its void, if that is your will. Having removed yourself from the confinement of your fear, you are free to expand your truth into that void of doubt. Your jump represents your will to scale down your fear to a mere whisper. Now, imagine you and your species with your advanced abilities with virtually no fear. How accepting might you be to expand your truth into those voids of doubt? He sees you nodding and says, yeah, I thought so. Christos, my suzerain, I believe it's time for you to fly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Time for you
Unmute.
to fly. Yeah. Mute. There we go.
Yeah. I forgot I could mute myself. I don't know. I just think my dog's like hacking in the background.
Yeah, it just kept hitting.
Chloe.
It was disturbing my timing.
And Chloe's like, you were talking about animals. You didn't say one word about me.
Jealousy.
Yeah.
I feel. See us. Are we blurry to you or moving slow?
Now you're not. Yeah, when you move, you are.
Yeah, it's
I
interesting.
can see through your pixelated hand, your fakeness.
Isn't that weird? Doing that in the middle of the thing, and it was funny because given our conversation this morning, so many frames per minute per second.
Yep. We had a conversation this morning when I woke up because I had like an epiphany of epiphanies,
Yeah.
and I was talking about, our awareness is typically like 30 frames a second. And I was telling her about moving into where having the capability of being aware of 1,000,000 frames a second, because there are things going on between the frames that we are currently watching now that we aren't aware of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I thought it was interesting that our video is acting weird.
Is the audio coming through clearly?
It's perfectly clear. Yeah.
Okay, good.
That's good.
Well, I'm
That's
glad
the
it.
important part.
Yeah, so that was pretty deep, right?
Yes.
Yeah, you're good.
It's amazing.
No matter how much you think you got from it,
Deep but familiar.
Yeah.
and it's
Yes.
right.
Yeah.
It was meant to put it in such a way that it was not so foreign.
Yeah.
But even no matter how much you think you got from hearing it, because even I wrote it and I still had to go back and read it a couple of times before I went, oh, because I got the obvious ones. It's the integrated ones, the ones that, oh, I had to go back to the beginning and even at the beginning. I mean, you realize the way I ended it, and then go back to the beginning. Grab my glasses. And even in the beginning, there was a point when
He's referencing back to when he met Valur.
yeah, he said, have no fear as you step into the state that harbors none, and release the last of your need to struggle against a will that offers no resistance.
Mm-hmm. No, that just feels good. Yeah.
I mean, I didn't plan this, people.
Well, and the funny thing is, Jenny sent me a video this morning, which you didn't know about, but she sent me a thing as Abraham Hicks, and it talked about get in the space of no resistance, and that can be your dream time or your imagination time, and it fits right with that, fits right with that. Mm-hmm.
So it's just amazing because after I finished writing this, and I went back and read it. I mean, I went back a couple of times, but it not until I got to the end that I went back and read it, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it completed the loop. And it was just like, oh my gosh, I wish I was that intelligent to have said, yeah, I planned that.
Well, what was so interesting too was the whole accepting and acceptance. You're accepting, and then once you've accepted it, it's in your past, it's your acceptance. And so that whole, flow of your life, we're constantly in the path of accepting the next thing that's coming.
Right. But acceptance is for what has already occurred.
Mm-hmm.
That is in the past. Mm-hmm. Accepting is in the now for what is coming. Mm-hmm. And so acceptance and accepting are not the same thing. But once you are accepting of something, anything you bring in joins your acceptance.
Plus the accepting of it, the less resistance that you have in it through fear, the easier it is to flow into that next phase,
Well,
it's so I'm like thinking about, I don't know that I ever actually actively accept anything because I'm always just kind of now. So when stuff happens, it's just like, I mean, it's just either it just happens, you know what I mean? Like, I don't even, it's like, okay, I don't even have like an opinion about it, or I don't know. I'm just thinking about it now that we're talking about that, about accepting it.
Like, I mean, accepting it, because otherwise you would be resisting it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we often
like not even just
we often resist things by not being around it.
Mm-hmm.
We avoid it. That's when you're not being accepting. Being accepting is not avoiding your truth, which is you can feel your will pointing you towards something and you don't resist it. That is you being accepting. If you're not in the state of accepting, you are in resistance.
Yeah. And it just makes the ride a little bumpier.
Because
yeah, it's just, that's exactly what it just makes for a hard road.
right. Because it is going to happen.
Yeah.
That's what Christos realized. He had already decided. He already knew that he was going to have that moment. And he then manifested Doug, Annie, and Valor to assist him in him accepting it.
Yeah.
And it's just, I mean,
because if you remember in the very beginning, he was in resistance to going off with the Pleiades. You know, he could feel it, he could sense it, he knew that was probably the next step, but he kept pushing it off because he was wanting to enjoy. And how many times we do that? I can speak for myself. You get an intuition and you know it's coming and you're going like, but yeah, that'll be later, I'll do that later, you know. Yeah, you can definitely feel it.
Yeah, and all you do is expand time to have more in your acceptance, because that whatever you felt is coming. You felt it, you know it's coming. You may avoid it now, but your will has already put it in your path. And you can have a sense that you're putting it off, but really all you're doing is expanding time. That's all you're doing.
Yeah.
And making the lesson a deeper hard, like, I don't know what to say hard, because it is what it is, but it's more layers to it. You're going to have to go through almost the same thing in different variations more than once.
Yeah, and like in his scenario with Christos, involved more beings. It involved and Doug and Valor, you know. So it involved more people. He had more people there to kind of bump him along.
It creates more karma as well. Yeah, you know, like with other things, it like.
Well, they do it willingly. I mean, and only willing to go so far. Doug was willing to go further and push Christos to go visit the Pleiades at their stall at the festival, and then Valor willingly, because he in this one he even told, when I saw you coming, I knew what your intent was. Your intent was you had already decided, and you just wanted someone to help you resolve your doubt and become accepting of what your will had put in, what his will had put in front of him. Yeah. It's just, like I said, I wish I was intelligent enough to have planned all that out.
Yeah. Well, what also came up with that for me was in that, and you just said it popped up in my head again, was that Valor wasn't planning for what Christos could do, looking at Christos's, potential and skill and whatever, and saying, oh, we need to get him on board to do this. It wasn't like he was recruiting Christos. It was more that Christos was on that path, and Valor saw that path and decided, was he willing to play that role? It's a different scenario. It's each of us have a path and each of us have a choice, but it's not our responsibility to convince. You talked about convincing Christos of doing something or convincing him that he needed to play these roles. He was more watching Christos's path, and then whether he was going to play in that game or not, so to speak.
Right. All along, Christos has reserved telling him certain things that he knew he was resistant to. So he didn't force it on him.
Right.
He waited until he was asking questions. He didn't tell him he was a keeper at the at the very beginning, because he knew that he still hadn't decided yet.
Yeah.
It's just
it's so fascinating. So good. Yeah.
But the funny thing is, we all have the ability to do stuff like this. I'm putting it into basically a virtual world and describing it, and so that we can all tap into it. But if you can understand it, you can do it.
Well, it's funny too, because there's been things that I've posted, and a lot of what Jenny's posted on Facebook, I'll tell Tim, I'm like, guess what Jenny posted today, after he reads me something, and I'll be like, oh my gosh, let me tell you what she posted. And it's the same kind of energy.
Yeah.
Maybe I posted something similar, so the energy is there.
I'm just tapping into it, and then I'm somehow getting some storytelling ability coming out of me, and I find the words because my intent is to do that. I like moving a lot to make it blurry.
Don't know what in the world.
Can you keep up with me? Can you see my face? Can you?
You're phasing out. He's getting ready to bloop.
Uh-oh. Wait a minute, I haven't done the crystal. I haven't blooped you in. So this is fun. I'm enjoying this. It is becoming much more synchronistic.
Are your birdies?
Yes, outside the door, outside the room.
Getting loud.
They are all day long like that.
That's almost all, every day.
Yeah.
Even during the pouring down rain today.
Yeah. All day.
You know, it's cool. They're probably putting a message on this video so that someone's going to watch it, and the birds that are around that person are going to pick up on their video message.
See, I like that imagination right there. That's what I'm talking about. That we need more of that.
Yeah. Yeah, who knows? That's right. Awesome.
Yeah, this is fun. I'm enjoying this.
Me too.
And this one, I mean, it's been 6 days since we did a video, and this one was 15 pages. And I was still writing, but it was, instead of doing 2 or 3 pages in a sitting, I was getting maybe a quarter or a half a page. It was just, I don't know, there was just more heft to it, more volume, and it was making me really process this to go, is that how I understand it? I mean, I wrote it down, and then I go back and read it and go, really? Is that the way I...
You had to accept it.
Yeah, I was doing it while I was reading. Everything that I talked about there, I was employing that in that to accept it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just amazing how I'm living these concepts.
Yeah.
And to be able to pull this down, which everyone else has access to, but to be able to pull this down and in the moment write this down and gather this together into a cohesive story. Like I said, I wish I could say I was intelligent enough to be able to do this on my own without assistance, but
yeah,
it's too integrated. It's too, I mean, I bet if we went back and read the episode where Christoph and Doug met with Valor the first time, we would see a lot of parallels, and we would see a lot of what Valor talked about in this episode about back then, and go, oh yeah, look at the way that's meshed.
I feel like you could have been a scribe in many past lives, like a storyteller, maybe even like way back, like in the monastic period or something, and way back. I could see you being a storyteller or a scribe.
Yeah, I'm a master at holding a pencil. I can do that like nobody's business.
Yeah, what fascinates me, because I've written several reports, like different kinds of reports, and you started out, and usually you have to do a rough cut or get some kind of structure to it or an outline to have it flow in a good way. Because a blank sheet of paper, I mean, you could just see the divine,
I erase
collective guidance in a way.
I erase a little bit. I erase a line or... Yeah,
but not like, you don't get to page 500 and go, oh man, to really lay this out, I needed to do these things at page 200, which is what normally happens when you're doing a story.
No, we're putting out the episodes
just as they're coming.
I think it's like your ego's out of the way. Your human self isn't in the way to say, oh no, that doesn't sound good, or that's not right, or just to question any of it. You're allowing it to completely flow through.
Well, it's funny because come out, and he was going, all I keep getting is a poem, and I don't know why I'm getting a poem. You know, and we were talking about it. It was like we'd have a narrative and then a poem. It's like, why? But the poem fit beautifully, and it was then feeding into the next piece. And,
Awesome.
yeah, it's really, it's really fun.
It is fun.
Mm-hmm.
I like not having any pressure because I don't have to worry about. I mean, it's serving my purpose by living it and going through it. And so instead of having to worry about, oh, should we put this into a book and try to make money or do anything like that, it's like, no, I want everyone to have this. Let's just put it out there at a blog and do it. That way, if people want to hear it, they can hear it. If they want to read it, they can read it. If they want to do both, whatever.
See, and I love the energy behind that, because there is no need to charge it, because you'll always be supported, because there's no need to ever want or need anything, because you're always going to be supported. You know?
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Fearless.
It's a nice feeling.
Energy. Yeah.
It's nice. It's a nice feeling. I don't worry about it.
Yeah, you don't let the fear come in. Like a bit of that, no fear.
Yep.
You feel complete?
Well, I feel pretty good about that one. I enjoyed that episode.
Yeah, that was good. I will look forward to reading it and typing it, because I know there's more in it for me there, because I was kind of reading it as you were reading it.
I saw you reading over his shoulder. I was like, that's not fair.
That is not. Okay, that's it. Next time, I'm going to lean over like this. I feel like I'm at a card game, and Miss Peeping Tom over here has to kind of look at your cards and cheat. Gosh, I didn't realize.
I don't usually do that, but this one I did.
And I've read most of it to her. I just didn't read the
last part.
The last part.
Well, I was thinking I'd be doing the same thing too. I was like, I'd be reading it too. I was right there.
I'm gonna have to do my own videos without you guys. I'm appalled at both of you.
Hey, we use all of our faculties.
Get every advantage you can
right.
while you can.
Absorb it any way possible.
I made fire cider today. That's on the way. So
yeah, nice.
Yeah, we missed that.
Yes.
We like starting our mornings out with that.
That was very good. Awesome.
Yeah. Just mix in some tequila and we're golden.
That would be good, like a Bloody Mary addition to a Bloody Mary mix, probably.
Probably, yeah. I should get if you do it with Bloody Mary, you get your red for the root chakra too. It's the same. Awesome.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cheaters.
Hey.
Now I know what I'm surrounded with.
Definition of cheaters. Who defines what cheating is?
Yeah. Yep. 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 Mm-hmm.
Yep.
I don't know. I'm gonna check with Terry.
Yeah, we haven't heard from Terry and Dottie lately.
I know they've been pretty quiet, haven't they? I think they're just waiting. I think they're out shopping. I think they're waiting for the moment.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. Are we complete?
I think so.
All right.
I think so.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, guys.
I even see the hands.
Mine's not doing it.